Hey everybody, this is Adam with Shield Solutions. I appreciate you coming and watching this video today. This will be a brief and hopefully fairly simple explanation of a few different types of pistols, right? So one of a revolver, but basically different categories and subcategories. And I basically want to make this, I know you could probably find maybe literally thousands of other videos on this. So you happen to find this one, I appreciate you coming. I just remember years and years ago when I had questions about things, it wasn't as easy to find some of the answers. Right now, you can pretty much Google or YouTube anything. So maybe you found out about this channel from one of our firearms classes, our CWP classes, or whatever. So thank you so much for dropping in and welcome to the channel. I just wanted to help explain some of these things that honestly, I'll find people every day in classes that they said they've been around guns for a long time and they didn't know some of these types of firearms, right? Because you get used to one platform or another. So I have all of these slides are locked to the rear, locked to the rear, locked to the rear. So everything's been safety checked already. We'll still make a good practice and try to do it as I pick up each one here. I do have two magazines laying out. One's to the Smith & Wesson and one is to this Rock Island. And they're going to be part of the conversation, right? So ideally, we have no live ammo present right now, right? So kind of starting at the very top of this to the two types of handguns that we'll primarily be dealing with, but you have a semi-automatic pistol and you have a revolver, right? And in those two categories, you have subcategories. So starting simply first, so again, safety check, no magazine. Well, you can see my face, right? No ammunition. We've looked and inspected, physically looked and inspected. So I'm going to release that slide, right? There is no one to my left, no one to my right. And so if this gun gets pointed in your direction, you're not going to get hit with it because you're not with me right now. But for those of you that know this, be patient because this is, again, we're helping people learn. So in a semi-automatic pistol, semi-automatic means that as I press the trigger, one round will fire, and then until I press the trigger again, it's not going to fire again, right? It is considered an auto-loading firearm because in the process I would do this with this semi-automatic, I'd have my magazine loaded up, I'd insert my magazine, I'm going to rack my slide to the rear. That will allow the round to chamber, or the round to feed into the chamber and sit right. So as I press the trigger, boom, right? So it's gonna fire. We'll talk about the way it fires. As it fires, the energy is pushing the bullet forward. The residual energy, if you will, is pushing the slide to the rear, and it's loading the new one and it's resetting. And all I have to do is just keep pulling. So I don't have to rack this every time, right? If I'm firing this for real, just like you've seen in any John Wick movie or whatever, I'm going boom, and this is going to cycle for itself. And so every time I pull the trigger, it's going to fire and load a new one for me until it runs out. So that's why it's an auto-loading semi-automatic firearm, right? This one is a Glock 44. This is 22 long rifle is the caliber. We use these a lot for our CWP classes or for teaching new students. The CWP classes mainly, before I get a lot of hate, because ammunition is expensive for people and sometimes people have access to the training. We try to find ways to make it affordable, right? So when you're learning about guns, sometimes it can all seem overwhelming. Be patient with yourself. And then if you know about guns, be patient with other people, all right, and help them learn. This is a Glock 44. Glocks are the model numbers are based off of their patent numbers. They do correlate to a caliber. And as you become a Glock nerd down the road, you'll probably know like all the Glock model numbers and which calibers they relate to. But it takes time. So, but again, like a Glock 44 does not mean this is a 44 Magnum. A Glock 44 is a 22 long rifle pistol. It's a really fun gun. It's the same footprint, same almost everything in size as a Glock 19. So if you have a Glock 19 holster already, boom, this thing will fit right into it. It's a really fun gun to run, fun gun to train with, a fun gun to teach with, because people can feel more confident in learning to handle the pistol safely. And then over time can move into something else. So this is a striker fired pistol. So instead of having a hammer like, we'll use this one right here, cleared and empty. See, there's a hammer right here on the back. So instead of having a hammer, it's got an internal striker, which as you press the trigger, basically it's going to cock the striker and release it to hit the firing, or have the firing pin hit the primer on the round that's in there and make it go boom. So there's not a hammer you have to cock or anything. There's an internal striker. I've seen a lot of differing information on this one, but more commonly a striker fired pistol is still referred to as a double action striker fired, because as I'm pressing the trigger, it's kind of cocking the striker and releasing it. Or the cycle of the slide is cocking it. There's a few different subcategories of these. The Walther, what is it, Q99, QA even had a decocker on the trigger, or for the trigger mechanism on a striker fired. And there's probably a few other striker fired guns that have those. I just couldn't name any off the top of my head. But it was pretty cool. You could have it into a cock position and then press the little button on the side to decock it on the Walther. And from what I've been told about it, they had a holster system which designed to where you could actually, as it sat in there, push the gun down a little bit, and it would let you push it down just enough to actually cock that cocking mechanism on that Walther and let you fire. But on this Glock, it doesn't have anything like that, right? So it doesn't have a manual safety, but it does have external safeties and some internal ways of keeping it safe. But bottom line of any gun, you shouldn't trust the safety is the only part to make it not go off, right? So this has a little trigger safety right here. But this is a semi-automatic striker-fired gun. And a semi-automatic meaning every time I press the trigger, boom, it'll fire one time. An automatic pistol would be if I held down the trigger, it would keep firing. Now that's not to be confused with auto loading like we talked about. A semi-automatic pistol is auto loading because you don't have to manually load it every single time. I fire it, as I fire it, it's gonna cycle and pick up the next round. So there you go. Glock 44, striker fired, 22 LR. Fun gun. All right, so the water will start to get a little bit muddier here for some people, right? So this is going to be clear, safety checked, right? Hello. Nothing in there. This is a single action only semi-automatic pistol. So semi-automatic, like we talked about with the last one. So as I fire the trigger or pull the trigger, it's going to fire one time. It's going to cycle on its own and pick one up, and then I can just press the trigger, boom, 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 right? Every time I press the trigger and it goes boom, the slide's going to move, come back, and pick up a new one. So it's a semi-automatic, meaning one, I pull the trigger, a round goes off. It's still an auto-loading pistol because it's loaded on its own. So a lot of times people confuse auto-loading with automatic. It's not an automatic. Single action only, and that's the relationship in the basically between the trigger and the hammer. So this gun, when we think about the action, a single action means that the trigger can only do one single action with it in the firing process. And for this gun, it's going to basically be to allow me to release that hammer. So if this hammer is down right now and I press the trigger, you can see I'm pressing the trigger, the safety's not on right now. I'm pressing the trigger and it's not firing because the hammer has to be back. So for some people are like, oh my gosh, so I have to pull the hammer back every time. No, it's still a semi-automatic pistol. So the way this is kind of designed to run is I would take my magazine, which is clear and empty. There's nothing in there, right? I would load up my rounds. This is a 45 ACP or 45 auto, some big rounds, right? I'd load those up, boom, 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 boom. I would insert that into the firearm and then I'd rack it back. When I rack it back, the movement of that slide cocked it for me. I don't have to do that. It's already cocked. So if I'm at the range and I'm about to fire, then I press the trigger. You can see the hammer go down right now. Watch. Boop, hammer's down. And then as it fires the round, the energy left over is going to push that slide to the rear and it's going to cock it for me. So as I'm firing, the hammer is going to be back each time because it's single action only and the trigger is just releasing the hammer. But I don't have to manually do that on the semi-automatic. All I have to do is say, have fun, boom, 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 and enjoy my time at the range. No, guys, that's not really how I hold it. I'm just doing it for the video, right? So a couple of things with the 1911 platform, which is what this is. So this is a Rock Island Armory 1911, really nice gun, borrowed from a friend. Thank you, sir, for letting me get a hold of this for the video. It's taken me a long time to make these videos on this. Life happened, right? So to identify this gun, this is a full frame, so a full size gun, 1911, single action only pistol. So the way this gun is designed to be carried, right? I'll argue that point all day long, is what a lot of people refer to, or is referred to as condition 1. So full magazine inserted in there, bracket loaded on in. So this has an ambidextrous safety. So I have a safety switch on this side and one on this side too, right? So this is designed to be carried with one in the chamber, hammer back, manual safety engaged. And for 1911 platforms, they also have a grip safety too. So if I don't have this grip safety engaged and I take my safety off, if I don't have that grip safety engaged and I press my trigger, nothing will happen. That grip safety would have to be engaged for me to be able to depress the trigger. So if even for whatever reason, if somebody left this laying there, which they shouldn't, but with that safety off and not on, it won't fire as long as I don't depress that. But this gun is designed to be carried hammer back, manual safety on, one in the chamber, fully loaded magazine. As I come out of my holster with this, I'm already gripping the handle, which is going to depress that grip safety. I don't have to think about that. A lot of people get worried about that, like, oh, I don't want to have to like think about pushing a button. No, you don't have to do that, right? Grip safety is coming off. And as I'm getting onto my threat, my thumb is already turning off this safety. So I'm coming from my holster, disengaging this, lining everything up, boom, boom, ready to go, right? That is the way it's designed to be carried. One challenge with this gun is to clear it, right? So if I'm loaded, I have my safety on. The safety, you can see it better in this side. The safety will lock out the frame on a 1911, right? So I'll take my magazine out. I might do a separate video on this, right? And this is when it becomes the most, if you will, maybe vulnerable for an opportunity for it to go, for you to cause an error. So now I need to clear this, right? So I have to take the safety off and then I will rack that slide to the rear, right? So theoretically, if you wanted to argue that point, at that point, when I'm taking my safety off, if I'm an idiot and I press the trigger, it will fire. That's not a gun malfunction. That's not a problem with the thing. That's me being a dumb person. So there are single action only platforms that the safety does not lock off the movement of the slide. Two that come up to mind right away are the SIG like 938, 238 series and the Kimber Micro 9s. I think the Smith & Wesson CSXs are the same. Beautiful guns, kind of based off of a 1911 platform. They don't have the grip safety aspect, and the manual safety does not lock out the slide. So the cool thing for that is even with the manual safety engaged, I can take my magazine out, rack my slide to the rear, empty it out, and never have taken it off safe. But this gun designed to be carried full mag, one in the chamber, manual safety on. So another point with manual safeties, for single action only platforms, manual safeties are essential to it, if you will. But with striker fired guns, some of them have safety, some of them don't. When it comes to striker fired pistols, I tell people, like, if having a safety is something you think you want in your mind, then order one that has a manual safety. With single action only pistols, use the safety. With the striker fired, you could choose to use it or not. But make either way, right? If you carry a gun that has a manual safety to it, make sure that you're making that safety activation and deactivation part of your training reps, right? You're building reps in the quality way. So if I have my gun full magazine, one in the chamber, and I have it in my holster, right? In my holster, and I only go to the range, or this I'll carry around all day. But when I go to the range, I bring it in my range bag, I load it up, I turn off my safety, boom, 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 boom. I fire so many rounds, take out my magazine, load it up again, put it back in there, boom, 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 boom. Do the same thing, finish a box of 50. That's fine, right? But the problem is if I'm not building the rep of getting my finger used to turning this off and on, then I probably won't remember it when I need it most. So make sure that you make it, and a lot of ranges won't let you pull from the holster anymore, which is challenging. But if I have this thing holstered, as I'm coming up, my other hand's out of the way, right? As I'm coming up and I'm getting on target, I've already turned off that safety, right? Boom, 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 boom. And before I reholster, my thumb is already engaging that safety and reholstering. Nice and smooth, not worried about anything coming off, right? We want it nice and smooth in, nice and smooth out. So it's not any extra really step once you get used to it. Your thumb's already doing it. And honestly, if I am shooting a gun that doesn't even have a manual safety, my thumb is kind of already finding that spot, because I do change back and forth here and there in using a single action pistol and a striker fire pistol, which we'll talk about that too. But a problem that was happening apparently for some people is they didn't like the idea of a gun with a hammer back. They're like, that thing's just going to go off. So some people would try to like outsmart the gun, and they'd be like, well, I'm just going to treat it like I can decock it. So they would take off their safety. It'd be fully loaded. They're like, well, I'll just take my thumb, or it's kind of hard to get a hold of right here for the video, but I'll just take my thumb and I'll ride that hammer down, not letting it fire. But I'm having to press the trigger when I'm doing that on a loaded gun. So you could imagine some people, oops, and he ended up firing it. Not ideal. Then other people were carrying it with the fully loaded magazine, but not loaded at all, and safety down. That means that you would have to train that as you come out, you're racking it back, and you're going to have enough time to rack it back and get it on target and fire. Some people can do it. Some people can do it super, super fast. But one of the best points I've ever heard about that is, keep in mind that what if the first round to go off was theirs and it took out this hand? Now you've got to make sure you have a way of coming out of there. And now how am I going to rack my slide, right? So one of the chambers is really important on that. So single action only pistol, semi-automatic, manual safety for this one. This is a 1911 platform. Single action, meaning just the relationship between the trigger and the hammer. It can do one single action, which is release that hammer, right? I cannot fire it with that hammer down. Single action only. Let me know if you have questions down below. Now we'll get into a double action only pistol. So this is a Ruger LCP. This is LCP stands for lightweight compact pistol, right? I think there's another little definition in there somewhere too. I used to hate on these guns so much, right? So I don't have big hands, and this thing is tiny, right? So 380 is the caliber. That's argued all day long about 380 not having the ballistics to do work and all that good stuff too. But it's going to have a lot more ability to do work than the gun that you didn't carry that day, right? Because if you have no other gun with you, this is still the better option. Big pros about this gun, it's usually like $180, like super cheap, 6+1 capacity. Depending on the model that you get, there are some that have some upgraded sights. I don't want to do anything. I'm going to try to stay out of the way, but their sights are very minimal on that, because this gun is not designed to be at the range shooting from 25 yards away for accuracy, right? This is the classic like bug gun, the backup gun, the get off of me gun. I can carry this thing with me anywhere. A long time ago, a friend, Dan, hopefully you're not watching, I'm giving you a shout out every time, told me this was his carry gun of choice, and I was carrying a Glock 30 at the time, and I'm like, man, it's, you know what, it's not that much harder for me to carry the Glock 30, and I have 45 ACP, and I was very stubborn in my mindset. And he's like, man, but you can have this thing on you anytime. And I was kind of like, I mean, that's true, but I'll always make a way to carry the other thing. And then over time, I found myself to be like, well, I can't use that gun with this this clothes that I'm wearing today. You throw on a pair of gym shorts or lounging pants or whatever, that bigger gun's going to pull it down right away. This thing, man, you can carry it in your gym shorts and your beach shorts and anything that you need to do. It's going to work well. It's not a very heavy gun. And it works. Like, I have not had any issues with this gun. Smaller guns can be a little bit snappy for people to get used to. You can they sell these like overmolded grips you can put on there and everything. I had one on there and it just made it big again. And I didn't want a big gun. Like, this thing, for me, whole other conversation, I guess, sits in a pocket style holster in my pocket. And is only to come out if I need it, right? And then if I'm training at the range. So this is considered a double action only pistol. I'm going to kind of stand out of the way here so I don't flag myself. But there's the hammer in the back. So I'm going to stand off to the side here a little bit, and you can see that as I press the trigger, see the hammer starts to come back and then releases. So it goes dead at that point. But as I pull the trigger, that's kind of like the first action, and then the release, boom, is the second action. So double action only. This one will not fire without the hammer already, or without, the trigger pressing the hammer back and releasing it. And it doesn't, as the slide moves, it doesn't cock the hammer for you. It's in a double action mode. So every pull of the trigger is bringing the hammer to the rear and releasing it. Some things to kind of say right away about that is every pull of this trigger is heavier feeling than a pull of like your striker fired guns usually, or your single action. It feels heavier because that's part of the safety design for this. This doesn't have a manual safety. That's help if you accidentally are an idiot and shove something into your pocket along with this gun. It's going to help because you have to really mean to pull this trigger to make it fire, right? But protecting that trigger guard is incredibly important. If I have this thing on me, there's nothing else in that pocket, right? I'm not shoving my keys in there, and it's already in a holster that's going to protect the trigger guard. But as it comes out, the way that that holster is designed, and I reach in there, I just grab the grip of the gun. The holster is designed to stay in the pocket. Boom, 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 get my rounds off. You know, if I'm at the range training, pull it out. Boom, 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 get my rounds off. And then you take the holster out, you put it back together, and then you put the whole system back into your pocket. You're not going to take the gun and start fishing that gun back in your pocket, because this is when people shoot their leg off, right? Maybe not their whole leg off, but being extreme. So that gun is called a double action only, meaning as I pull the trigger, it's going to cock the hammer back and it's going to release the hammer for me. All right. Ruger LCP, can't recommend these things enough. Everybody should have one, right? They're cheap. Buy one. All right. Here's where the water gets the muddiest for most people. This is an older pistol, right? So this is the Smith & Wesson 6906. Borrowed from a friend for the purpose of this video. It was his dad's pistol. So not one that he's even had any experience firing before. But he does have I guess he said his dad put a grip on it. It's one of those Hogue style, like overmolded rubber grips, which are great if you have big hands. I don't have big hands, so I don't use these. But he's had it forever, and you can kind of see that it's starting to tear and stuff right there. So, but I asked him if he had a double action, single action kind of gun, so I can show this video. So this one has a lot of interesting features to talk about. So this is a hammer fired gun, right? But it's a recessed hammer, so you can't actually manually pull the trigger or pull the hammer on this thing at all. And it has a decocker. So it's on, this is ambidextrous, so it's right here. So it's the decocker and the safety. So one cool thing about this gun, right? So starting off right away, semi-automatic, right? So as I pull the trigger, boom, it's going to fire. The slide's going to come back, pick up the next round and fire. So semi-automatic, auto-loading pistol, like that other ones that we've talked about. The interesting thing with this, right, is this gun can fire either with the hammer back or with the hammer down. Now, the other interesting thing that I have to bring up to start showing you is this gun is designed to where it has a safety factor to where this specific one will not fire without a magazine in there. So there's nothing in the mag, but you can see right now, if there's nothing in there, we'll clear it just for everybody to see, right? Empty, nothing in there. Visually, cool. All right. So this gun will not do anything, right? Turn that safety back on, nothing. Safety off, nothing, right? Rack it back, nothing, right? It won't do anything without a magazine in there first. So I'm going to have to put this magazine in there to show you how this thing works, right? So ideally, when you open this thing up, it would be laying just like this. You take your magazine, fully loaded, you're going to insert that in. Make sure it seats. So another thing with these Hogue grips, if you're not careful, over molded type grips like that can interfere with the magazine seating if you're not paying attention. Not if you use them the right way, but it does happen for some people. So we notice one thing is the hammer, I'm tilting off to the side here, is recessed against the back of the slide. I can't even get a finger on it. If I take this decocker / safety and I push it into a safety mode, you can kind of see that the hammer pushes back a little bit because that essentially is a block between letting the hammer connect with the firing pin on there. So I am going to put that loaded magazine in there. I'm going to rack it, and a loaded magazine would let me rack right to the rear and let it go, right? this gun, now you can see the hammer is in a cocked back position. So to carry this gun, it's not recommended to carry this gun with the hammer back and safety, you know, the way this is. So we would flip the decocker, and the decocker is ambidextrous, so there's one on each side. I'm a right-handed shooter, so I'm going to work it with my right thumb, and you're going to see it on this side move down too. So that released the hammer, right? The problem is, for this gun, if it's still left in the down position, that's the safety, so it won't fire. So if I do this, I would prefer hammer down, safety up, right? And then when I drop from the holster, I'm coming out. As I press the trigger, so you can watch my finger press the trigger, the hammer's going to come back and release. Boom, that round goes off. As that round goes off, the slide's going to cycle to the rear, right? And it's going to cock the hammer back for me. So every single time after that first time, when I'm pressing the trigger, it's just releasing that hammer, right? It's just going boom. So that's the single action mode. So if it's in this mode right here, from the holster, hammer down, then the trigger is moving that hammer back and releasing it. That's the double action mode. And then as it cycles through, that's the single action mode. So the trigger pull for one is going to be a lot heavier than the trigger pull for the other. The challenge with that is until you get comfortable with that platform, you know, you're drawing out on your target and you're like, ugh, so you can see that person's going to start dipping sometimes right away. Or they're like, ooh, they get their first round off, then it cycles, and then they think the next one's going to be that heavy, and then they dip again, right? And they kind of mess up their firing thing. So you have to be able to get your mind used to firing it in double action mode and in single action mode, and running the decocker and addressing the safety factors with it. It sounds like there's a lot of things to consider with it, and I guess there are. But once you train with this gun and you're used to this gun, you won't have any problems with that. What I do really, really, really recommend, if possible, is try to keep consistent in your style of firearms and in your carry of firearms. Because if I'm used to running a striker fired pistol all the time, and I'd like to say, I'm going to run a double action, single action today, and I don't train with it, I can end up doing something that can maybe at the least create an issue for the gun, next into injuring myself or another person, or maybe not being able to deploy it fast enough if there's a threat. So I don't like the idea of one day carrying a double action, one day carrying a single action, one day doing this, one day doing that. You want your consistency to be across the board. But I do firmly believe that anybody who works around firearms, with firearms, whatever, needs to have a good understanding of how to address the different platforms of firearms, right? Basically how to clear them, especially law enforcement. Not knocking anybody in that world, but there's a lot of law enforcement that they only know firearms from the gun that they carry, right? They only know their Glock 17 or their Glock 22s, 320s or whatever. And they don't ever take the time to learn about another platform, another style of carrying, another mechanism of firing. And then if they find firearms and they're trying to clear them, you know, you can watch Cops and all those, and you can watch YouTube videos where people accidentally are trying to clear the gun, they don't understand it, and they fire it off, right? So again, this one, the challenge with this one is if I don't have that magazine in there for this specific gun, it wouldn't let me do any of those things. So I couldn't walk you through those steps by taking the magazine out first, but ideally I would have. I'd remove that magazine. Some other single action or some other double action, single action platforms that more people are more common with. A lot of your SIG 226, 229s have a double action, single action variant to them. And they have a single action only platform. But then your Beretta 92s, 96s, two good examples. The Beretta has a decocker safety kind of like this. The SIGs is usually a lever right here. That's the decocker lever to release that safety. The double action, single action, Smith & Wesson 6906. Fun gun to shoot, nice and heavy, holds that recoil pretty well. And then the last one that we're going to talk about, but not the last one out there for sure. So this is what's referred to as a double action revolver, right? So we don't have a moving cylinder or moving slide. We have a cylinder here, and for this one, it has a little latch that you'd push forward, and then you can push out the cylinder. It's going to hinge out to the side, right? Cool. So this holds 5 rounds. This is a Taurus ultralight in 38 special. So for the revolvers, when they label as a double action revolver, think of it like a double action. Usually, think of it like a double action, single action, semi-automatic, right? So I can fire this gun one of 2 ways. In single action only mode, where I take my thumb and I pull the hammer back, and you can see how much that cocked the trigger for me, right? Now it's just a light boop touch of that to make it go off. It can fire that way. Or I can actually press the trigger all the way back and release it. Boom, and then it goes off. So as I'm firing this, when the hammer is coming back, it's moving, or the mechanism here that's cocking the trigger is moving the cylinder, right? So basically, as I fire, the one that's in line with it rotates out, and then the next one coming up is the one that'll be in line for it for when it goes off. So just think about that if you're loading it up or having any issues with it too. That basically the next one up in rotation. Another cool thing about these is they have these little grooves here. They kind of look like acorns. Whichever way those acorns point to is the way that that cylinder spins, right? So if you're not sure which way on this gun, the cylinders turn this way or that way. If you just look at those little acorn grooves, you can see which way that it's spinning for you. The double action frames typically will allow the cylinder to swing out, and then you have your shell ejectors right here, so you can push this down and it's gonna kind of scoop up the rim of the casings and eject them out. And then you can load your new ones in, boop, 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 and put it in there. And again, I can fire it either single action mode with the hammer already cocked back, or double action mode. And that's going to be the heavy pull, right? It's a heavier pull of the trigger, or hammer back, light pull of the trigger. One thing I try to avoid saying nevers and all that stuff, but one thing I would really not recommend ever is having that hammer back like this and then holstering it, right? And it's a light pull of that trigger, and it's gonna go. I'm going to try to get a single action only revolver at some point to show you on here. Don't have one today. Challenges with these guns can be sometimes their sights aren't great. You can see it's kind of just a groove. The lighter weight the revolver in the same caliber is going to have more of a felt recoil, right? Another thing is pulling that heavy trigger back. Another challenge can be, you don't hear this very often, but with this little hammer spur coming back here, if that does catch on anything, right? So if you're pushing this into your bag and it pulls it back, but not enough to cock it, that can make it go off, right? So they do make double action revolvers that basically have the hammer recessed, or even like not even visible in the recessed, or just kind of cut off to where they're right in line with the frame of it, so there isn't an exposed hammer that can get caught on anything. So that's my main thing with concealed carry thoughts about using this, is just be careful that hammer doesn't brush up on anything to where it can just get pulled back enough to end up going off. It can be pretty challenging, right? So double action revolvers, so think of that as a double action / single action in there. That's all. I'll probably try to make little videos on each one of these to explain a few other things that maybe we didn't cover here in the past 30 minutes. But for those of you that have shot a lot, shot a little, whatever, what do you guys prefer to carry? Striker fired, hammer fired, double action, single action, with a safety, without a safety? Feel free to throw that in the comments, have some dialogue, have some discussions. I always say you got to do what's right for you and safe for others, right? So keep it lawful, keep it legal. But somebody else might carry a different gun in a different manner, right? Or they might carry the same gun as you in a completely different manner. And usually what happens is people start arguing about that, like, oh, you're an idiot if you don't carry this gun this way. Be kind with people, be patient, let them do what works best for them, to their training, all that good stuff. The biggest thing is we don't want to do anything illegal and do anything unsafe. We don't want people's lives to be put in jeopardy. When you're carrying this gun around, any of these guns, right, and you're going to your local restaurant and you accidentally discharge that firearm because you didn't know what you were doing, and it sinks into the head of a 4-year-old over there, saying, I didn't mean to, isn't going to bring that kid back and isn't going to excuse your criminal charge there, right? So learn about it, take time, teach others, learn as much as you can. If you have questions, man, put them in the comments. And again, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Stay safe.